Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos offense cooked in the passing game on what was an important day in joint practices against the Arizona Cardinals. We'll tell you why today's going to matter more than Saturday's preseason game here on today's episode. Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, Broncos Country? Welcome to another episode, Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network. You know it's your team every day. Thank you so much to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country. Thanks for tuning in and making us your first listen, however you choose to do so. If you're not yet an everydayer, become one. Hit that subscribe or that follow button so you never miss out on all your Broncos news, content, coverage, analysis, and more. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports. We're going to recap the aftermath of the Arizona Cardinals, Denver Broncos joint training camp practice here from Thursday on a day that saw Bo Nix and the Broncos offense have success in the passing game, but the run game didn't get off to the start that they wanted to against that Cardinals defensive front. We'll go through some of the key standouts and what we saw on Bo Nix's day in today's episode of the show. Plus, we'll highlight on some of the Broncos' defensive struggles against Trey McBride in Thursday's joint practice. So we'll go through some injury updates on Nik Bonitto and some others to round it out before Saturday's preseason game. So let's jump into it. Broncos Country, let's get into Bo Nix and the Broncos offense. The Cardinals joint practice, the way that this was set up, the offense was on one field, the defense was on another, so it couldn't be on both fields at the same exact time. So my focus, because we've been wanting to see what the offense is going to do, if they could bounce back from some of their struggles, my focus was on the offensive field here during this practice, but I got some defensive notes, which we'll share later from some of my other good beat reporters that I happen to be so lucky enough to work with. So going through this, let's go through Bo Nix and the offense. Really, it was his sharpest day of practice here in training camp. And it was nice to see because it came against a different opponent, a different look. And I really feel that this Arizona Cardinals defense, it's going to be sneaky good this upcoming season. Now, obviously, Jonathan Gannon, he's going to run that defense there. I think that the guys that they have on that defensive line, they are big up front. They're athletic linebackers at the second level. Their defensive backs have a combination of youth, but you could tell just athleticism and versatility across the board. It's going to be a sneaky good Cardinals defense, I feel like, this upcoming season. A 4-3 look compared to the 4-2-5 look the Broncos faced last week against the San Francisco 49ers here. But, you know, for Bo Nix and the offense, it was a day where the passing game, it really clicked. I mean, Bo was on fire to the point he's chucking passes downfield left and right, finding guys like Devon Vele, Courtland Sutton, Marvin Mims, Pat Bryant. He's getting tight ends involved here. Bo was decisive with the football in this joint practice. He sidestepped pressure from that defensive line from time to time. And there were a couple instances throughout the various team periods throughout the day where I feel like that Cardinals defensive line and that front seven, they got pressure and they got to Bo maybe once or twice here. Montez Sweat got after Mike McGlinchey and got Bo on one play in a real game situation if it were to translate that way. But, man, Bo was decisive with the football. He wasn't holding on to it too long, and he was just knowing where to go. And he was analyzing and attacking this Cardinals defense really on the fly because it's a different look than anything that they've gone up against from the Broncos defense or even from the 49ers defense last week. There were different spots that they wanted to attack, and I thought they did a really good job. And it all started not only with Bo, but really Courtland Sutton being the accelerator here. And I think he probably hauled in the play of the day. The Broncos were in a kind of a move the ball period. It was in the goal line. Bo threw a beautiful fade ball there to Courtland Sutton from about 15 to 20 yards and touchdown, perfectly placed, both feet in bounds. I mean, this was, you wanted to see great command of the offense here from Bo and the offense. You saw exactly that in this joint practice. But, you know, for the offense, it wasn't all great outside of the passing game, outside of Bo Nix. So for Broncos Country, take comfort in knowing that, hey, Bo, he shined, especially with all the different conflicting reports that fans, I think, have been getting. It really is beauty in the eye of the beholder. Some people are saying Bo's had a terrible camp. I think Bo's had a pretty solid camp. I think the good has outweighed the bad in some of the things that Bo has done here. But I think this practice against the Cardinals today kind of culminated that, hey, Bo, he's going to be just fine. And Sean Payton knows that. There was some excitement there that Sean had. We got to catch up with him for a 30-minute presser after practice. Usually he doesn't give us that long, and he had a lot to say. We'll get to some of the stuff he said. But let's get into the bad stuff here on the offense. I felt like for the offensive line today, there were times where pressure definitely got through and you saw some guys struggle. Now I think of the story that we're going to highlight here. Garrett Bowles exited practice pretty quickly after the whole team period began because he was having some breathing issues. As we all know, Garrett has some asthma. So he went and he sat in an ambulance for about 25, 30 minutes and then walked in with a medic and also a trainer, walked into the building. So that is a great sign. I know there were a lot of Broncos fans that were concerned about that, but Garrett, he should be good. He should be fine. And, you always got to be safe and careful with things like that and that type of moment and that type of environment. But glad that Garrett is okay. In terms of the offensive line, definitely felt like at times the physicality and the size of that Cardinals defensive line, I felt like it got the best of the offensive line. They did a lot of different stunts that I felt like attacked the leverage of the Broncos O-line, and you're starting to see guys trying to adjust on the fly. I thought Frank Crum did a really good job stepping in for Garrett Bowles. Matt Parrott got some reps at left tackle as well. He and Crum alternated a little bit. But Mike McGlinchey had, from our observation, all of us in the media, and granted, once again, we don't know what his coaching responsibility is, but Montez Sweat beat him on one play for a clear sack on Bo Nix, and he just seemed to struggle at times with sealing a guy or being able to hold a guy off. He's attacking, he's moving outside, he's doing his kick step laterally because the defender's trying to rush upfield, and then the defender cuts back inside on a run play and makes the tackle, for a loss in the backfield. So, like I said, we don't know exactly what the play call was. I don't know what Mike McGlinchey's coaching responsibility was, but the reason I know that Mike was frustrated himself was he was clapping his hands and he was shouting. He was expressing some frustration on his behalf. And so I just think you want to continue to see him improve here. I mean, the expectations of this Broncos offensive line are big this upcoming season because certain metrics, they were the number one graded unit behind the scenes by the Broncos, their coaching staff, their front office. They graded the highest out of everything. So what is it that's leading to some of these early on struggles? I think it's just a refinement. It's a technique thing, and it's just stuff you're going to get better at when you get more reps. And, I think that you saw that adjustment climb. But for the Broncos offense, where they struggled was some of those aspects, breakdowns in that protection there. Bo Nix was able to make some plays out of it. It really was the run game. It was the run blocking there. Now, granted, in our period, Sean is manufacturing here different looks. He's starting off 1st and 10, and then the next play will say, hey, we're on a 3rd and 5 situation. So he's giving that instruction to the Broncos offense and the Cardinals defense so they can adjust accordingly. And you get these manufactured simulated looks based on situational football. I like that aspect, but the Broncos just simply could not run the ball. Jaleel McLaughlin, R.J. Harvey, J.K. Dobbins. I mean, I think Jaleel had one nice cut back inside. I think J.K. had one as well for about 7 or 8 yards, and R.J. Harvey had one. But really, that Arizona Cardinals defensive line, they did a good job of stopping the Broncos run game, which I think we're all looking at as a continuation of last year and saying, wow, like if you can't run the football this year, it's going to make things more difficult here for Bo Nix and the offense. Certainly that was the case, but luckily on this day, Bo Nix shined. I had a chance to ask Sean after practice about getting the run game, like trying to find that balance and consistency. And Sean actually said that they're further ahead and they're more pleased with the run game, the run blocking than maybe we in the media might be seeing at this point.
Here's the thing. All right, you ready? You haven't seen it yet because in every drill, there's an early whistle. We stay up on the backs. You saw a little last week, right? When it's tackle, you'll see more. I would say we're much further along just in the looks. So it's hard to appreciate when you're working a thud-up, touch-up tempo. What's really hard is being the coach of the drill saying 2nd and 7 or 2nd and, it's hard to, to kind of spot the ball when it's not tackled. But I think you'll see it. We've seen it.
So, I mean, look, at Sean and these guys, we have practice that we get to see as the media, but then they have walkthroughs and other practices that they do later on in the day that aren't open to the media or to the general public. So there are some things, and I also know we've received tons of questions about Evan Ingram and how come we haven't seen much of him. I think that Sean, my hunch is that I feel like the Broncos are intentionally not showing what they plan to do here with Evan Ingram, which I love that. I mean, have that joker in your deck, so to speak, there. You want to be able to have the advantage in that, and you want to maybe surprise some people. But we have to see this offensive line improve in the run blocking game, and we have to see the backs be able to see the hole and hit it. But we're not going to see that here on Saturday, essentially with Bo Nix, J.K. Dobbins, or RJ Harvey. Though, Harvey could get some carries, but Sean Payton told us after practice that the plan is that the Broncos and Cardinals are not going to play a lot of their first team, their core guys, offensively, defensively in this game, this preseason game, exclusively because of the work that these guys put in joint training camp practices. Now, for that note, too, because I know a lot of Broncos fans are going to wonder, well, is this the last we've seen of Bo Nix and the starters here in the preseason? Sean did say that he's actually going to play the starters, probably 8 to 10 snaps in the preseason finale against the New Orleans Saints versus those guys playing this week. So next week's going to be a fully padded week. It's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, full pads, travel on Friday, play on Saturday of next week against New Orleans, and that's where they're at here. But Broncos Country, let us know your thoughts here on the reports coming out of practice today. Like I said, I was only able to watch the offensive side of the ball. Bo Nix, a really, really sharp day for him. How do you feel about that? Make sure you let us know here on today's bonus episode, Locked On Broncos. We're not done yet. We're going to go through some of the reports coming out, some of the conversations I had following practice after the Broncos defense gave up some big plays in some soft spots in zone coverage and in man. Is that a concern here to come in the regular season? I'll share my thoughts on that and more here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy, and it's the best time of the year, folks, because NFL kickoff, it's almost here, and that means that fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy, they are turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. So this year, join Sayre Bedinger, myself over here, Locked On Broncos. We are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or you're a veteran that's making your millionth league. And I've used Yahoo Fantasy before, especially when I was in high school. I got in a group with some of my players, some of the coaches, and till this day, we try to keep that league alive a little bit. And Yahoo Fantasy is the perfect platform to do it because to celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy, they are dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. And to kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. And if you're more into the classics, you can still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. Today's episode of the show is also brought to you by our friends over there at Monarch Money. And most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. Don't do that. That's where Monarch Money comes in handy because it's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life and picture together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone, wherever you're at. And Monarch does the heavy lifting for you, where you can link all of your accounts in minutes, see clear data, get visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel like you're in control of your money without ever having to touch a spreadsheet. Check it out today, and don't let the financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNFL. The Broncos defense seemingly struggled with stopping opposing team tight ends in Thursday's joint practice against the Arizona Cardinals. How concerning is this development as we get to week 2 of the NFL preseason? We'll continue on here. I want to say real quick, Broncos Country, thank you so much for rocking with us every single day here on Locked On Broncos. You should make us your first listen. If you want to know what's going on with your team, to the point, straight info from what we see at practice, this is the place to be. And you get it delivered directly. Have us with a cup of coffee. Take us on go with you wherever you're at. We appreciate you so much, Broncos Country, as always. The Broncos defense, once again, like I said, we're able, you're only able to be on one field. I can't split my body in half and send it to the other field. So I relied a lot on my good friends that I get to share, the opportunity to cover the Broncos with on the beat, and Parker Gabriel and Henry Chisholm of DNVR, obviously, keeping us up to date on some of the defensive stuff there that they saw. And, there were some ups and downs here from this Broncos defense and some good looks. And, I think against a different offensive look and different skill set, Marvin Harrison Jr. certainly is bigger than he was last year. We talk about a guy who put on some muscle. I talked to someone from the Cardinals beat. He put on at least 10 pounds this offseason, which is crazy. He looks like an entirely different player. But they had a really good combination of wide receivers. Greg Dortch making some plays, Zay Jones, Marvin Harrison Jr., and, of course, the story of the day was Trey McBride, former Colorado State Ram. he had a big day against the Broncos defense, against, the first team defense from time to time, but also against some of the other guys. There was one play where he was wide open, where he was signaling for a touchdown before the Kyler Murray even threw him the football. And so from what someone told me is that the secondary was a little bit different. You had Delarian Turner-Yell and some other guys in there at safety and in the secondary. So, I'm trusting the word of those guys, but certainly I think Broncos country, here's Trey McBride making this play, making that play, making all the plays here for the Cardinals. And I think it just brings up this concern that, okay, hey, why can't the Broncos stop tight ends? Without being able to see the practice film, certainly you want to be able to go through and make these adjustments. That's what the coaching staff is obviously going to do. I'm not worried yet. We haven't really seen this trend happen in week 1 of the preseason against the 49ers. Will we see it here in this game when these two teams face off on Saturday? And will we see this in week 1 of the NFL regular season when Cam Ward and the Tennessee Titans come to town? Because certainly, for a young quarterback, you want to have a security blanket at the tight end position. We're excited to see what a tight end could do for Bo Nix, but this is something I think is a communication thing that the Broncos defense has to fix. And, the defensive line, some pressure getting there, guys getting a few sacks on Kyler Murray, which is something you want to see. And then in the final move of the ball period here, Jahdae Barron blitzing from the nickel position did a really good job of jumping up, knocking a pass down and batting it down there, preventing a big play from happening. So, some good, some bad here. But overall, I think the vibe from practice and what Sean told us afterwards is that he and Gannon talked afterwards and they felt like that they had gotten a lot of great work together, and that Sean talked to the defensive staff. They told them some of the things that happened there. He said, we're going to go back and we need to see what happened so we can correct it. I think so much of it could be communication stuff there on the back end or in the intermediate levels of the field. But once again, with how they use Trey McBride, he's a large volume, a large target type of pass catching tight end option. And so if you're having him come wide open against the other scheme that you have, that's problematic, because Denver is going to face some really talented tight ends this upcoming season. You can't let that become a consistent problem here going forward. So that's your Broncos report here of the day on today's bonus episode, Locked On Broncos. Let's go through some injury news and notes here. Obviously, we talked about Garrett Bowles, a little bit of a scare that he had obviously in this practice. We talked about yesterday's practice where Damari Mathis left and did not return. He was back at practice today and competed fully in this joint training camp practice. But one of the Broncos' new signings after Matt Henningsen went on injured reserve, Gregory Jr. suffered an injury, walked off the field with a trainer, and I think that's a hamstring-related injury. So the new guy dealing with a hammy injury right there. Reese Taylor out for yet another practice with a hamstring injury. And then Michael Burton pulled up with a hamstring injury as well. So Denver and their offense went into this joint practice really after that first team series without a fullback. So maybe that did change some of the things that they were trying to do, because I think they went a little bit more heavy tight end sets after that, because guess what? Nate Adkins just had a little surgery. He's not going to be ready till sometime in the regular season at the early portion of it. That's something that Sean Payton told us. He said the Adkins had a tightrope surgery. So it's something that's not going to hold him out for an extensive period of time, but he is going to miss time going into the regular season. And I know that they really like what he brings to the table. So we'll wait to see what goes on here with Michael Burton, who's obviously a veteran. I wouldn't expect him to play in Saturday's preseason game against the Cardinals here, 7:30 p.m. Mountain Time kickoff, but something worth monitoring here as time goes on. But probably the story from the injury side of things here is Nik Bonitto apparently having a little bit of a deposit, like a bone spurt on the top of his foot that actually got a small minor surgical procedure. It removed it. He's got about 3 stitches in his foot. And Sean Payton said it's one of those things where it's like a 3 to 5 day turnaround. So for him, he weighing the pros and cons. Nick wanted to come out and practice this week, but he said, you know what, why do that when this is something that instead of dealing with this every Monday after you play a game, why not just get it out? You're going to miss 5 days here of training camp and this preseason game, but you're going to be back on the field next week and you're going to get a few reps against the New Orleans Saints, according to what Payton told us after practice. I think Broncos country would take that latter option, and that's certainly what Bonitto took himself, getting the procedure done small, minimally invasive at that point there. And now he's got that bone spurt out, and he'll be back on the field next week, and we'll see. I mean, Sean said that the plan is to go full pads all week, and he said, I don't want to hear any whining from people about it, and then we're going to go play a game on Saturday because roster cuts are looming in about 11 to 12 days. So overall, Thursday's joint practice here with the Cardinals, I feel like was a massive success here for this team, and unfortunately, we're not going to see the starters play in this game, which is a little bit of a downside because I know Broncos fans who are coming to the game, they wanted to be able to see Bo Nix in the offense. get some run and get some opportunities to maybe refresh themselves after what we saw in that first preseason game against San Francisco. You're going to have to wait till next week to do that when the team is on the road at New Orleans here. But one thing I will say is that this was probably the more impressive confidence building day for Bo Nix. We're going to reiterate that here once again. I think a lot of people see like the ups and downs on social media and you latch onto something either too positive or too negative, whereas Bo's done some really good things in practice. He's had some down moments. He's had some things where you're wondering, why did he make that decision? But I'll tell you this, and I will stay firm. I will knock on wood. And there is nothing about Bo's offseason or his training camp that has me in any way, shape, or form the slightest bit concerned. I am really not. And I'm not going to lie to you, Broncos country. I'm out there at practice every day. I like to think I know what I'm looking at. And surely I don't get everything right, but I would say that the overreaction about Bo and his struggles, I feel like it's being over-amplified in a negative sense. Bo's doing just fine. Sean's not worried about it. We'll see. Like, there's some areas he's obviously got to clean up. And if those issues persist a little bit into the regular season, then we can have a conversation. But Bo's done a lot of great things. And I felt like today he came out and he kind of had a little chip on his shoulder, and he was slinging that thing all across the entire field, making plays to everybody. That's the stuff that we want to see. Tuning out the noise, going out there and making plays. That's exactly what Bo did. But Broncos country, we appreciate you so much for tuning in to this bonus episode here today on Locked On Broncos. Your boy, Sayre Bedinger, myself, we're going to be back tomorrow as we go through our game preview, our players to watch on offense, defense, and our keys to victory, what we want to see from this Broncos team. Even though the starters aren't playing, there's a lot that we can evaluate here about the depth. As Sean Payton says, we know we have some tough decisions coming up. We feel like the roster, we're way ahead of where we were last year. The depth is in a great spot. Great problem to have, but it's also one that the Broncos have to 2 weeks to really kind of figure out here. 2 games to evaluate. So many different position battles ongoing. We'll share our thoughts on all that and more on tomorrow's game preview here on Locked On Broncos, Broncos Country. We'll see you then.